Sweeter than watching the media watch us get those awards. All right, we're live.
Yeah, we are live, so let's just we have to give it a couple minutes for people to come on.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. We're just going to give it a minute here for everyone to come on. Wisconsin right now.
Yeah, we got people on.
Yeah, Wisconsin right now, uncensored. With People Varchek, with Jessica McBride and Scarlett Johnson. And today, I was going to say, and today we have a special guest is joining us, I think from California. It's Robin Vos to discuss some of the, I guess we could say, fireworks that happened today during negotiations of the revenue plan. Jessica?
Yeah, and Robin, thank you so much for doing this. I know you're out of state and we appreciate it. So we're going to cut right to the chase because we know your time is limited. We thought it was important for you to come on and have a chance to tell people from your perspective what the heck is going on in Madison. So obviously, I think a lot of people saw the headlines that the media are depicting it as this impasse between you and Senate leadership, Republican Devin LeMahieu, over the shared revenue plan. So in your words, can you just tell everybody what is going on?
Sure. Well, first of all, if I go back to November, Tony Kurtz in the Assembly and a bunch of us began to realize as we went through the campaign cycle that the inflation caused by overspending in Washington was having an incredibly negative impact on local governments. Obviously, Republicans for a long time have been supporters of holding down property taxes and trying to squeeze out efficiencies inside government. And I think we've done a pretty good job on that. Of course, there's always more to do. But when we see 6, 7, 8% inflation, big wage increases that are happening in the private sector, it's pretty hard for local governments to be able to find a way to generate enough revenue to keep competitive. So we came up with a plan. It was copied by Governor Evers that basically says of our 5-cent sales tax, we're going to allocate 1 cent of the 5 cents or 20% of our sales tax to a segregated fund that is going to go toward paying the local government shared revenue. What happens is there's an old formula that was frozen almost 20 years ago. It has a huge bias toward big cities. So we did not want to just keep giving the money the way that a formula was developed 40 years ago. So we sat down and we negotiated with our Senate colleagues, the Democrats, City of Milwaukee, Milwaukee County, to try to find an updated way to do this. So we, first of all, said we have to make sure that the people who aren't getting the resources get more than those who already are. So the plan that we adopted has kind of a bias towards small towns and rural areas because they were not getting hardly anything under the shared revenue formula. It also has a bunch of things in there to change how we think about issues of local government. It has restrictions on who can close a business down. Because right now, under current law, there's no restrictions whatsoever. Under our bill, they would have to close all businesses. They couldn't just close one. And they would also have to be able to do it for 30 days. And then the local government has to vote it to maximum 60 days. So I know some want it to be 0. That's what I want. But again, there's no restrictions now. So this is an improvement on current law. There's a bunch of good things like that inside the bill, which is why we brought it to a vote yesterday. So we've been doing this literally for 6 months, negotiating, going back and forth, meeting with the mayor, the county exec, as I said, Democrats and Republicans. And I have always said we need to have a deadline because negotiations can never end. But there were certain bottom lines that we said we weren't going to violate. Number one, we weren't going to have the shared revenue formula, the old one, be the main vehicle because it has a heavy bias against a lot of communities in Wisconsin. In Milwaukee, we were not going to have a solution that didn't actually help to fix the problem. So we negotiated that back and forth. And then ultimately, we weren't going to make it easy to raise taxes. That's where some people are. And that's really what the ending sticking point is. They want to make it as easy as possible to raise taxes in Milwaukee and Milwaukee County. And it shouldn't be like that. MMAC, the state's Chamber of Commerce in Milwaukee, actually for 10 years has been saying, just let us have a referendum to figure out our own solution. So we want to give them exactly what they requested. Governor Evers, in his budget, actually asked for a referendum for Milwaukee. So it is not some kind of a radical position for us to say what Republicans have believed literally for the past 30, 40 years. And that's if you're going to create a brand new tax, the people should be the ones ultimately enacting it. So that's really what the disagreement is. I don't want the entire bill to die. this is something that Assembly Republicans are pretty steadfast on. We are not just going to roll over, make it easy for people who've mismanaged, their own finances to be able to raise taxes. And the mayor and the county exec are not the ones who caused the problem, right? They don't deserve all the blame. They have to go out there and explain to people why this is going to enable the city and the county to not reduce funding for libraries, to make sure that transit can be funded, that we also have law enforcement. So it's a really good bill. The last sticking point that we didn't negotiate was one that there's just a difference of opinion, I guess. I kind of feel like it's a core Republican principle that if you're going to create a new tax, people should be the ones doing it, but maybe I'm wrong on it.
So I'm wondering how far, Robin, that you are willing to go in terms of, I guess, digging your heels in on this point. So if the Senate says we insist on, removing this referendum, and I guess LeMahieu wants it to go to the Common Council, Milwaukee or whatever, I guess how firm are you in digging your heels in on this current package and on the referendum question?
I'm pretty darn firm. I mean, we had a caucus discussion about it. People are in the same place. This is the same Common Council people who put money into the hot and, have all these crazy things. So if you think that they can't find a way to raise taxes, of course they're going to do it. I mean, so by giving us the quote unquote authority, they're going to do it. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Now, we did in negotiations offer the ability to have a unanimous vote of the Common Council, which would mean that every single member has to own that decision when they run for re-election. Because we all know if it's a 2/3 or a 3/4 vote, people are all going to scurry around and they'll figure out how to get it passed anyways and let the people who they think are vulnerable off. Well, if this is the biggest problem that they face, and I actually believe them that it is, it should be no problem to convince the very people who are in the room seeing what the issues are that they should vote yes. So I really think it should be a referendum. We were willing to compromise and say it should be a unanimous vote, but they can't even accept that. They want to make it too easy, and that's just a bridge too far for us.
Jim, you had a question for him, I know, on that point.
Yeah, Robin, I'm curious, do you believe that if it did go to a referendum of the citizens of Milwaukee, that they would actually vote for the increase?
I really don't know. I mean, the question comes down to it that if you explain to people that the question is voting yes to enact a sales tax, which nobody wants, or we're going to have massive cuts to police, the library, transit, all of the services people depend on. I mean, you look around the state, 80% of school referendums pass when they ask to build a new school. 60% of operating referendums pass when they say the choice is putting money in classrooms or having fewer teachers. So if they go out there and sell it, I certainly think there's a chance. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. Are they going to have to admit 20 or 30 years of previous mayor's mismanagement? You betcha they will. But that's what the people want. They want politicians and elected officials who are going to stand up, tell the truth, and say, this is the way we solve the problem. I just think, again, making it too easy is the political answer, but it's not the right answer.
What if it went to referendum and it was voted down, and then the city's facing looming bankruptcy? Like, what's the fallback plan if there is one? What happens?
I don't want this to happen. They might have to go bankrupt. I mean, that is not anywhere near the top of the list, but it certainly is something that has to be considered. When you have financially mismanaged a city to the point that they have, the only option that might be left is bankruptcy. And again, that should be the absolute last, resort, but it shouldn't be off the table. Because if the people of the city want to have a reduction in services and they don't want to increase the revenues to do it, well, then the only other option might be bankruptcy. So that's why I feel like we gave them that option for a unanimous vote, which would mean that the elected officials all have to own the decision, because it should be a once in 100-year decision when you have to close a pension, make up for the financial mismanagement of the past. But if every elected official doesn't own it, they certainly shouldn't just be able to impose it on the citizens without some kind of a very difficult kind of high bar to meet.
What would the ramifications of bankruptcy be?
Well, you look at what happened in Detroit. So in Detroit, when bankruptcy occurred, they had the federal judge, I think, went in and appointed somebody who was basically a receiver. They changed the way they did business. And they have kind of turned Detroit around. So in some ways, there might be some aspects of it that could be positive, but it's far too early to tell. And again, that shouldn't even be on our radar. I am optimistic that they have the ability to go to the people, to explain it to them, and to get the referendum passed. And short of that, again, we are willing to compromise to say unanimous vote. So I feel like we're giving them two viable options, neither one easy, but both able to be accomplished if they're just willing to put their nose to the grindstone.
Can you address, and one of our commenters brought this up, but also County Executive Paul Farrow brought this up. They're trying to argue that it's unfair to Waukesha County. What's your take on that?
Well, Waukesha County gets a 500% increase. Now, maybe the Republicans in Waukesha County want 1,000% increase, but I feel like a 500% increase, which is one of the larger ones, is pretty reasonable. Now, if we totally rewrote the formula and had it on a per person basis, I would be open to looking at that, because there are some places in the state that get 50 cents per person, and there are other places that get $500 per person. That is the old shared revenue formula that is outdated and wrong. But we also know with liberals in control, they are not going to take money away from big cities where they are in control. Frankly, Governor Evers wants to keep putting more and more there at the expense of smaller places and suburbs. So this was about the best deal that we could cut. A 500% increase is something we should all be proud of, and not something that we're harboring.
Do you think you can get this through Evers and LeMahieu? I mean, what happens next? And I mean, you're saying you're not going to, I mean, you're digging your heels in on this point.
Yeah, I mean, we've negotiated in good faith for months. We have said from the very beginning that this was a core principle for us. They're willing to offer some core principle of theirs that's super, important to us. I've been in office long enough that you never say never, but the idea of just giving it away and saying we're going to let a core principle of ours fall by the wayside is absolutely, positively unacceptable and is never going to happen.
So what would you be willing to horse trade for this referendum? Give us something.
No offense, I'm not going to say that online right now. Trade for the referendum, because the referendum is a core principle. So again, it has to be, I am fighting for what I think every Republican believes, which is that it should not be easy to raise taxes. And it's actually not even raising taxes. It should not be easy to create a brand new tax that's never existed before. Because we all know that once a tax is created, the odds of it going away are, as remote as, the tooth fairy. It's never going to happen.
Jim, Scarlett, you have a question?
Yeah, Robin, I've got a question for you. Are there any other issues that are standing in the way, either between you and LeMahieu or you and Governor Evers, or is this really the big sticking point?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for either one of them. I mean, we have negotiated in good faith for months with the Senate. So they're really, everything that was in our bill were things that we all agreed to. So there's nothing in there that was something that was jammed on people other than the idea that we are going to have a referendum. That's the biggest sticking point. Now, Governor Evers, I can't speak for him either, but I think his answer is always more money. He wants more money for big cities. He doesn't like some of our policy decisions, but they are common sense middle ground. The idea of saying that we're not going to waste money on the hop. Well, when you have a financially mismanaged city, I don't think you're going to waste money on a trolley. That if you create new programs, you have to have a supermajority to even create a new spending program when you're going bankrupt. It's not something that should be controversial. So most of the things in the bill are common sense middle ground that were agreed to in one form or another by the city and the county executive. So I really feel like we've developed a very comprehensive, very middle of the road plan. Now, can people complain about it and find individual things that they hate? Sure. There are things in there that I don't like, but that's what compromise is all about. So to now leave and say, well, we're just going to take out the things that I don't like, but keep all the things that I do. Well, that's not acting in good faith. So
0 to 10, with 10 being you are sticking your ground. You're not willing to change anything at this point. Where are you at in terms of how much you're willing to bend on this at all? 0 to 10, 10 being not bend at all.
So remember, everything that we have in our bill was negotiated in good faith. So, I would say 9.9, okay. When you go negotiate in good faith, one person can't just walk away and say, we're going to change the deal and somehow, be able to keep their honor. It's just not, that's not the way it works.
So there's a few people, not many, but there's just a few people on social media and so forth who are saying, oh, this is not conservative somehow, that the assembly plan's not conservative. I know Steve Noss put out a tweet. He was critical of the assembly and the Senate. Can you address that claim? I don't think there are many people saying it, but I've heard it a little bit.
Well, I mean, yeah. Do I wish we had Becky Clayfish or Tim Michaels as the governor so we could have a truly conservative shared revenue plan? You bet I do. But if you want to get something done, I mean, I like Steve Noss. We have been friends for a long time, but he is only good at one thing, and that's being a critic. So yes, I mean, if you want to be a critic because there are some things in there that I don't like, well, you can do that. But if you want to actually get something done, you have to figure a way to say they need to get some things that are important to them. We get things that are important to us. And that's what a compromise is all about.
I thought it was interesting that Cavalier Johnson and David Crowley came to the table with you. And how did you get that to happen?
I give them credit. I mean, they actually said, let's sit down and see where we can find common ground. That's the whole point of trying to find a legitimate middle ground. Now, there are some things that they said they absolutely could not have. Now, it's a little bit in the weeds, but there are different ways that you can calculate how much the pension payments are. And they came to us saying that they had to have the formula that we put in the bill. That was their absolute most important thing. Okay, we gave them that. One of the things that I said was the absolute most important is that the people are the ones who ultimately get to make the decision on whether or not this tax increase is worth it. There are other things like defunding DEI and saying that we want to focus on merit. That was really important to us. They gave in on that to their credit. So I think this was one of those truly give and takes where you say, okay, there are things in there that I wouldn't do if it were all my own decision, but it's not. It's a shared responsibility. And I think that's why what we voted on the assembly is the package that should go to the governor, not have this wrangling because we're going to go back and relitigate everything that we spent 6 months trying to find consensus on.
So I feel like it should be a game of chicken right now, if you want to call it that, between a united legislature and Evers. Instead, you have Devin LeMahieu creating this scene where it's, a game of chicken between him and you, which I find really counterproductive and honestly a poor negotiating tactic when it comes to the ultimate game, with Evers. What is going on with Devin LeMahieu? Why is he doing this?
I mean, I have been very upfront in saying, look, I don't speak to Governor Evers and try to negotiate one-on-one because it should be a united legislature. So if you remember when Devin did that, it would have been right at the beginning of Evers when he was first majority leader. I got really angry because it weakens our position to have one negotiating while the other one sits on the sidelines. We need to both stand there together. And that's really what we have been doing on this entire package. We met with Governor Evers last week together. We met and talked about the things that we agreed on between our two caucuses together. And that's the way that this entire deal should be going. Now, I did set a deadline saying, look, we're on the floor on May 17th. I said that 7 or 8 weeks ago. So we have always known what the deadline was. And one of the things I also know, having been in the legislature a while, is if you don't have a deadline, nothing happens. So we said literally all week, I'll stay here until midnight if you want. Let's negotiate a final deal. Governor Evers didn't really engage. And unfortunately, we didn't get a lot from the Senate either. So here we sit.
And in terms of process, they need you, right? I mean, they have to have the assembly vote or this doesn't happen. They can hold press conferences all they want or oppose it in press releases all they want, but they need the assembly, right?
Right. All three have to jump off together. And that's the reason that we have been negotiating with all three of us, Democrats, Republicans, the Senate, the county, the city. We all need to be in unison. And I feel like up until, this last couple of days, we have been in unison. We have all realized that each of us have priorities. And that's where I don't know why we are turning from that negotiating tactic. It's not even negotiating, from that reality to say, we've all got to do this together because it's not going to get signed unless Evers is for it. It's not going to get even to him unless the Assembly and the Senate agree first.
So one of our listeners, Matthew Allen, said, let Milwaukee fall. What's your reaction to that?
That's not ideal. I mean, look, Milwaukee is our biggest economic driver. It's certainly huge for our region. I do not want Milwaukee to fail. I want them to solve their own problem. I don't want the state of Wisconsin, the people who live in Burlington or Rochester or any of our listening, any of your watching area, to say they're going to pay higher taxes to make up for the city of Milwaukee. But I don't have a problem encouraging and finding a way for them to solve their own problem. And that's really what our plan does. I think it's a conservative way to do it. It's not a bailout. It's not saying we're going to give $1 billion from the state of Wisconsin and hand it over to the city of Milwaukee. It's saying that they have the ability to decide for themselves, do they want cuts in services or do they want to pay a little bit more in taxes?
Jim and Scarlett?
Speaker Vos, I haven't seen the latest proposal that you guys are working on. A couple weeks ago, you put something else that included elimination of the personal property tax. Milwaukee can't spend any more money on DEI positions, and Milwaukee can't defund the MPD. And the street card also, Milwaukee would not be able to expand.
Everything
the
is
street card.
in there. Yep.
All of that's still in there. Okay, I want to make sure that because I loved all those proposals.
And the most important one to me, one of the other ones that I had as a core principle, is that whatever new money that we give has to go toward funding police, fire, public services, transportation. It can't be used for a bunch of, new age mumbo jumbo. And that's where we have that in the bill. So, it's pretty clear cut that the dollars that we're putting in go to the things that you think local government should do. Police, fire, EMS, roads, exactly where we want our dollars to go. So that's also a conservative win because they can't spend it on a bunch of, things that most people on the listeners wouldn't support.
We called them Easter eggs, the Easter eggs that you packed in there.
Right.
Great negotiating tactics, quite honestly, because honestly, Milwaukee is desperate, right? They're desperate because they so screwed up their pension system and so forth. And go ahead, Jim.
I've got a good question. So Christine Klug asked online here, wants to know if you would be able to tie more strings so that Milwaukee would be required to restructure their very generous pension plan. Is that something that you guys have considered as restricting Milwaukee, not only the city of Milwaukee, but Milwaukee County's pension system?
Well, we did it in a different way because court cases have said that once you're an employee, it's a vested right that you really have your pension as it is. So you can't go back and undo anything. But what we are saying is for every person that's hired after the bill passes, they will no longer be part of the city of Milwaukee or Milwaukee County's pension plan. They'll be part of the Wisconsin retirement system, which is run by the state, literally one of the only ones in the country that's fully funded. It's incredibly well run. And so we're gradually phasing people out. It's called a soft close, where it means that the people who are already in it, they get to stay in the system. But the people who are all new hires go to the state where the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County will have nothing to do with it other than paying into the system like everybody else does.
Scarlett, any questions or thoughts you have for Speaker Vos?
No, I think you guys have covered it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like people to know? I know that you have an event you have to go to, so we don't want to take much more of your time. But is there anything else?
I appreciate you guys letting it get out there. And the most important thing for people to realize is that the bill that we brought forward in the assembly is a conservative reform package. Don't necessarily believe what you read. Just go online and actually Google it and read it for yourself. We are trying to find ways to win as conservatives in a very challenging environment with a liberal governor. I think this does that, and it also finds a way to help us solve the pension problem, which, again, nobody wants to see Milwaukee go bankrupt. It should be an absolute last resort. But at the end of the day, we've got to find a way that everybody can get to a yes. So my hope is the state Senate takes a breath. They do a little bit of huffing and puffing, which I understand. The bill that we passed was a good, common sense, middle ground negotiations, and we get back to that. Which is the one that should actually get to Governor Evers' desk so we can move to the next issue.
We do have one question from a Milwaukee police officer, so I would like to pose this one. He asked about the Fire and Police Commission stuff that you had put in, the provisions that you had put into the original plan. Is that still in there? And can you briefly tell people, how you would reform the Fire and Police Commission through this plan?
Yeah, so one of the things that we learned is that the city of Milwaukee's Police and Fire Commission is almost unique in the entire country. The only other one that operates like Milwaukee is the city of Honolulu in Hawaii. And what that means is that in almost every other place around the country, the police chief, answerable to either the mayor or the city council, is the one who determines the policy. Whether you have no-knock search warrants, whether you do, chase cars through the city for speeding tickets, all the different policies that the police officers would have to utilize. And right now that's being determined by the Police and Fire Commission, made up of people who really have very little, if any, experience in law enforcement. So what we've done is we've changed it to say it's going to be exactly like almost every other police and fire commission in the country, where they will still have civilian oversight. That's important, but the policies are going to be set by the professional police chief, answerable to the mayor and the police and fire commission, not having the policies be dictated by that and that the police chief implements them. I think that will also go a long way in helping to fight crime in Milwaukee and make the investment that we're making in the shared revenue deal that gives over $20 million to Milwaukee to ensure that it goes toward fighting crime and not just allowing more of the bad stuff to happen.
Robin, I think what I liked the most about the plan is that it really marked the end of defund the police in Wisconsin, I thought. And
that's right.
That's fantastic. We're looking at what's happening in Milwaukee. And I've been hearing horror stories from Milwaukee police officers over the last, well, honestly, the last few years, but even in the last few days, where they're saying in District 6, sometimes there's one officer patrolling for the entire shift. I mean, this is how severe the staffing problems are on the MPD. And I know that your plan would stop that bleeding at the very least. It would freeze at least the staffing level in the MPD, which is way down, since like the mid 1990s. What are the chances realistically of getting that through Evers?
Well, it was already part of our negotiations. And the city agreed to it, which would basically set a minimum staffing level. I think it was, I don't have the notes in front of me, but I think it was 1,700. And then we would also have 25 MPD officers who would be deployed inside schools, because we know right now many of MPS schools are almost like a war zone. So we want to guarantee that those kids who are in there, the teachers, the staff, are safe. So we would gradually work toward that number. So whatever the number of sworn officers that are on the street right now could not go lower. And then over time, they would work toward that 1,700 with the revenues that are coming in from the potential sales tax.
That's a really big deal. And I wanted to thank you for putting all of that in there. And I guess then I would just give you the last word. What's your final word on this?
If you know anybody who's in elected office, call them and say, support the Assembly's deal. It's a really good deal for the citizens of Wisconsin. It's good for Southeastern Wisconsin. It's good for Milwaukee. It should become law. And let's hope it actually does.
Thank you, Robin.
Very good. Thank you very much, Speaker Vos.
Night. That was interesting.
Wow, that was great. Stephanie nailed it here. She said very informative discussion.
Yeah, it's informative for folks like me who I'm kind of dealing with a lot of other things, and maybe I'm not very tuned into that particular discussion. I know it's been a big topic, so I learned a lot.
Yeah, and Jim, you and I talked about this before. Robin Vos, he gets villainized by, I think it's a very small percentage of, the right. And I think often it's really misguided. And then when you hear him explain his perspective, you go, oh, okay, I see what he's doing, right?
Do you feel that there's enough, there's a way to be sure that these reforms or these Easter eggs will actually be done? That they're not things, oh, yes, I'll do it, anything to get the money that we need. And then how hard will it be to make sure that these reforms are implemented once they get the money they so desperately want?
That's a really good point. And the great part of the plan is this stuff is mandated. Like, to get the money, there are these restrictions put on it.
It would be
like
law.
They can't do it.
It would be actually like creating law that it can't be done.
Yeah.
So I think
So
it would be
right.
So if the Milwaukee Police Department has, instead of a DEI seminar, they call it a different name, which is what the woke tend to do. They call it a belonging seminar. All the same material, just a different name. I just want to be sure that there's a way to respond to that. I mean, do they what are the repercussions if they violate?
Yeah, I mean,
point.
The way it's written is that the city of Milwaukee can't use any new money on DEI positions. But you're right. So they just rename it, right? We know that the liberals are just artists at renaming positions and terms, and so they could just call it something else. How the law is going to be written, I don't know. But I think it's at least a good first step.
Yeah.
What I think is really, honestly, pretty strategically shrewd of Voss here is, I'm be honest, he knows he's got Milwaukee, and because of that, Evers, kind of by, excuse my language, the short hairs, right? I mean, because they're desperate. Why are they desperate? Because Milwaukee completely messed everything up. Like their pension system is so underfunded that they're facing looming bankruptcy and doomsday scenarios of what that would mean, right? And so they're literally desperate. And so you've got Devin LeMahieu in the Senate who doesn't seem to understand that. It doesn't seem to understand negotiation tactics. And so he's just going, oh, yeah, we agree with you, Evers. And, we agree, oh, we shouldn't have referendums, blah, blah, blah. And just caving on things that, are really important to the left and to Milwaukee and Evers. Whereas Voss is saying, no, if you want this authority, first of all, we're going to make you go through referendum, which seems on principle the right thing to do. But number two, we're going to make sure that conservatives get things out of this. You're desperate. Okay. We want, all the things that Jim ticked off, right? We don't want police defunded. We don't want you spending it on DEI positions. I agree with Scarlett. They could rename it. We don't want you throwing the money at the streetcar. We want cops back in schools. We want rural areas to get, properly treated in the funding formula. It's, the COVID stuff. It's actually strategically brilliant. Like he's trying to get something out of it because they're desperate.
Yes, I guess if you're going to give them the money anyway, you're eventually going to have to figure it out. Then you want to get something for it. The only thing I ever hear about Devin LeMahieu is flat tax. And then so now the other time I've heard of him, it's basically that he's siding with Evers. I'm not impressed.
I think he's terrible. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry.
Why is he the majority leader, by the way? I just question, what has he done?
I don't know. I mean, Jim.
I'm not impressed at all with LeMahieu.
What has he done? Why is he in the
nothing.
position he's in? I can think of other senators that are more worthy.
He's spineless.
Yeah.
We wouldn't take it. When we handed them the parole issue and the ability to fire Tate, and all he had to do, he had to call a special session, and he failed to do that. And then he allowed that ball to go into Evers' hand, and Evers capitalized on it. I mean, it was just I thought just a horrible strategic mistake.
I mean, if he's not going to stand up to Evers on this, there's a whole bunch of really good bills coming up, that are of interest to, I think, a lot of the viewers regarding parental rights in education, saving girls' sports, transparency in education, school choice. If he can't stand up to Evers on this, he's going to fall. He's going to fold real fast when there's really hard issues. This is not something difficult for LeMahieu. So imagine when something is really hard, when he has to take a stance that's going to be really unpopular.
Well, he's also today, I guess, trying to kill an abortion exceptions bill by shoving it in a committee that people think it won't get out of. And that also was a strategic move that Voss supports, because what they want to do is put the abortion exceptions bill on Evers' desk and force a veto. And you define Evers through the veto to shift the narrative, right? And it makes obvious sense. And today, LeMahieu shoved this into committee, and there was a Republican senator who put out a very tersely worded press release criticizing him for that. And then this wasn't his fault, but it was the prior Senate leadership. They rejected a plan by Vos. He wanted to take the Supreme Court race in 2020 off of the same date as the Democratic presidential primary to give Dan Kelly, who was then an incumbent, a fighting chance. They knew that the Democratic presidential primary turnout between Biden and Bernie would sink Dan Kelly because there wasn't a competitive primary on the Republican side. And so Vos wanted those on different dates, and the Senate leadership wouldn't do it for baffling reasons nobody can figure out. So honestly, Vos gets a lot of heat, but the Republicans in the state Senate, more often than not, they're the problem. I hate to say that, but they are, and they need to get their acts together.
You know, this plan, I agree, it's not the perfect plan, but like Robin said, if we had a Republican governor, yeah, we could go a lot more conservative on a lot of these issues. But the fact is, we have, unfortunately, a Democratic governor. And unless we get that supermajority in the assembly, there's not much we can do right now. We have to negotiate. And the fact that he is meeting with Evers, meeting with LeMahieu, and I mean, I think for the first time in Evers' administration, I mean, they're actually all getting together. They're acting like adults and they're trying to work this out. And I think I'm happy with a lot of the things in this plan. And so if we can get this passed, I think it would be a big win for Wisconsin Republicans.
Yeah. I agree. So should we move on to our next topic?
Jessica, you're silent. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Did I turn that off?
Yeah, you
Am I back?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering, like, why are you guys moving on? I'm still talking. Really, really quickly, and then I agree we should move to the next topic. Oh no, what was I saying? Now I blanked out. And it was such a brilliant point. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I forgot now.
When I saw you speaking, it looked like you were really passionate and knew what you were talking about.
Yeah, if I think about it later, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Has that ever happened to you?
Yes.
Or
yes.
you?
Yeah.
Like the thought just.
Yes.
There was one conversation here I want to get back to, and Nick Harris, you know I love you to death, but it's probably the first time we've ever disagreed on anything. Nick suggested it was not the taxpayers' fault. I'd have to find the comment here. And you know, Stephanie came back and said, but the taxpayers are the ones that put these people back in, you know, reelect them over and over again.
Yes.
And so I do think taxpayers, unfortunately, they are going to need to pay for this because they're the ones that are putting these people in power. All the way back to AIM it. This goes all the way back to the county pension crisis back in the 90s.
Yeah. I thought of electing these people, and you know.
I thought of my point.
I'm sorry, we've moved on. We're going to move on to the next topic. Go ahead.
My point is that I think that we created news tonight because I think one thing Robin Vos said was particularly probably newsworthy, where he said he's willing to let Milwaukee go bankrupt. Did you hear that? Like he said he wants it to be the last resort, but he's not jumping off a cliff at the notion of it. That is hardcore negotiating tactics right there, because he just sent a big, signal and message to Evers, to the Democrats, and honestly to Devin LeMahieu about how far he's willing to go. I don't think he's going to blink. So they're going to have to blink because he's willing to let that happen, is basically what he said.
So Jessica, let me ask you. If this actually went to a referendum, do you think City of Milwaukee taxpayers would pass a referendum?
Yes.
That is an interesting question.
I think they will, yes.
I just got compared to Joe Biden.
They don't have a problem with voting yes on referendums.
But even if it's a 2% sales tax?
It is a regressive tax, but they'll probably pass it. So I don't know what they're so worried about.
Okay.
And Matthew Allen said it's not Cavalier Johnson's fault. He inherited the mess. I agree. It's Tom Barrett's fault in part. And it's all of the Common Council's faults of the past, right? And it's Tom Barrett, who's off in Luxembourg, at art exhibits eating cheese or whatever he's doing in Luxembourg.
So Ed agrees with me. I don't think that they will pass it either.
I think they'll pass it. They'll market it. They're going to market it, and they'll pass it. I think they'll pass it.
All right. Well, that was a great interview. It's probably time to move on. If anyone else has any comments or thoughts. Anything else?
I just think the notion of Milwaukee going bankrupt is interesting, and I want to look into what happened to Detroit and other cities that ended up in receiverships.
Right. By the way, they don't fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
They don't. They're still They're still existing. And sometimes I think maybe they need to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
What happens though to maybe like vendor payments and the business community, you know, things like that, the economic climate? I mean, obviously it's a serious thing, and I'd like to see an analysis of that. Maybe we should do that. Look into the experience of other cities where that's happened.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that Vos telegraphed, like, if they don't give him what he wants, which is a conservative agenda, like he's willing to let it go that far. That's tough negotiating.
Yeah.
It is. All right. Scarlett, do you want to take this next one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Let me add this to the stream. So
Biden's ban on schools excluding males and female sports. Issue number 2. Jim,
Yeah.
I like your issue list here. We're going to do this every podcast to organize the topics.
Organize their thoughts and let people know what we're talking about. And you'll see I have a little banner going along the bottom. We're going to have the thing that we're discussing too. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's good. And then we have some visuals too for everyone to follow along with. But the Wisconsin Daily Star had this out today, and I think Vicki McKenna put this out there. And then as I read it, I noticed they even included one of my tweets in there. So that was pretty cool. But what this is really about is America making women second-class citizens. And I think a lot of people don't understand what's going on with Title IX completely. This is a second phase for the Biden administration. The first phase involved redefining what falls under Title IX and redefining sex to include gender identity, which means that something that was created to protect women's sports and discrimination against women and to protect women's opportunities is now opened up to biological men who feel like a woman. That's just an easy way to put it. So basically it's now a non-policy. There's a really confusing formula in this next phase of Title IX, where they claim that not every biological boy gets to just immediately play for whatever team that person wants to, whatever team he wants to, that there's going to be certain parameters. However, as this article goes on to show, those parameters are so confusing that you end up in a situation just like Sun Prairie. You end up in a situation where it's a non-policy, where the administrators get to say, no, we don't want a 18-year-old boy to shower naked and expose his penis to 14-year-old girls. That's not what we intend or what we want. But that is the result of not having a policy, because you can't define what a woman is. And you also are prohibited from barring a boy from being on the girls' soccer team, or barring a boy from going into the girls' shower room or the girls' bathroom. There's no limitations for that. And it's very confusing. There is a case it's a West Virginia case that is working its way through the appellate system. It's likely going to be heard by the Supreme Court. And this case is likely going to be one of the first heard by the Supreme Court, where a lot of these decisions I think are going to ultimately be decided. And how long it's going to take to get there, I don't know. And I would assume, you would hope that the Supreme Court would rule in defense of women, because what's really interesting is there are cases where even an Obama judge had to agree that it was just inherently unfair to allow a biological boy to compete on a woman's team. That looking through the science, looking through what we know is a biological reality, it's just inherently not fair. A boy that goes through puberty that a girl cannot compete with. So, but there's a little bit more to this because a lot of this centers around women's sports. And I think we all support Riley Gaines when she just recently testified, and it was extremely compelling. Everything she said, our safety, our privacy, it doesn't matter. We should smile and step aside and allow these men in our spaces or be called a bigot. And that is unfair. She describes how horrified and how unsafe and how traumatized she and other girls felt when they had to change alongside Leah Thomas, and, where they were exposed to the genitalia. And so I think that this is an issue that overwhelmingly Americans are on the side of common sense. They want to protect women's sports. They want to protect the girls. They want to protect the private spaces of women. But the Biden administration is in stark opposition to what the majority want, the majority of parents and the majority of people. What's going to happen? I think we know what's going to happen. These proposed rules are going to go into effect. When they do, I believe they'll likely go into effect as early as September of 2023, the next school year. When they do, there's going to be chaos and calamity because, and if you read through the article, it details that there's the definitions are not clear. They're going to be subjective. States that have passed bans, well, those bans are going to be nullified. And so those states are obviously going to petition through the courts. So it's going to be kind of a mess. And I think that, what's really important is that we still go in Wisconsin. What do? We still move forward. We still try to move forward with legislation that protects women's sports, that protects bathrooms and shower rooms for girls and for boys, to make sure that these places are spaces only for the biological sex of, only boys, only girls, and and have some gender neutral options. We also want to be sure that there isn't compelling of speech, the forced use of pronouns by students and teachers. And I think that most importantly, well, I shouldn't say most importantly, they're all important, but protecting minor children from testosterone, cross-sex hormones, and ultimately from surgeries, which remove their genitalia. I think it's really important that Wisconsin pass a bill, or at least attempt. We pass the bill, and if Evers wants to veto it, let him be the guy that's for removing the healthy breasts of teenage girls. We need to be on the side of what's moral and what's right and what's good.
So, Scarlett, this raises a good question about an incident that's just breaking out of McGuanago that we've just heard about today.
Yes.
In which
I would be careful with the facts on that.
I'm not gonna say any names.
No.
I'm not saying any names. Just gonna.
I'm uncomfortable with this. We don't have the facts verified on this.
We can say.
Okay. You don't want to discuss it at all?
No.
Okay. Okay.
We can discuss. Well, we can discuss the Adidas swimsuit.
You can discuss Adidas. I'm all down for that.
Yeah. So, it's funny you bring this up because I was going to share this same thing here. Today, I made a Facebook post, right? Because Jessica and I were talking, and I'm like, I can't believe it. I thought it was satire, and it's Adidas that's doing these pride swimsuits. They're it would be transgender or trans women swimsuits, and clearly, I don't know if you can see it. Not that you want to see it, but it's a woman's swimsuit, which it's a male wearing it, and he's got his whole junk. The junk's hanging out and everything. I mean, it's
yes.
It's here. Here, I got a better view of it here. Well, what's funny about this is that, so you know what retargeted ads are, right? Oh, I'll just add this one here. Yeah. So that's a guy wearing a women's swimsuit. retargeted ads, like if you think about something, you write something, then for the next few days, you've got it displayed on your Google and everything else. So all day today, no matter what I Googled, no matter where I surfed online, I was shown this guy dancing around on my screen all day long, and I couldn't get rid of it.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, if you look under where it says Pride swimsuit, it says women's swimwear, right?
Yeah.
So somebody had said in the comment thread a while back, that they're getting rid of women. And I sort of have to agree that there's this move in society to erase women. And if you don't have gender, because society's eradicated it, I mean, you do have gender, but I'm just saying, if society eradicates gender from the public conversation, how do you have women's rights?
Okay.
And then where are the feminists on that?
What I find interesting is in this ad, and if you continue down, and this is on my Twitter feed, and it's on the Twitter feed of a couple other groups like Ali of London, you'll notice that the men are thin and feminine, and kind of the bone structure of a girl. They're very feminized, except for their bulge that keeps protruding out. But then the women are amorphous blobs. They are not attractive. They do not even have really form. They look depressed and sad. And, and then Levi's also had a series of ads where the men are very effeminate and the women are just kind of blobs, no makeup, their hair undone. And I think
Sports Illustrated covers where, it's almost like they're getting rid of women's sexuality and women's sexual power or something. Like the Sports Illustrated covers where now you have an 81-year-old woman, God love Martha Stewart, but you have an 81-year-old woman on the swimsuit cover and a transgender individual. And I'm sorry, what's wrong with looking at a young, beautiful woman? Like, why is that somehow now, forbidden? It's like women's sexuality is being erased.
And if you notice, so when you just look at the cover, you would think, you just glancing at it, that's an attractive woman. You just look at the cover. There's a bait and switch kind of feel to this for boys, for men, like, she's maybe a guy looks, she's hot, finds out that's a biological man. I'm just wondering, what is the point of this? Because this didn't happen naturally. This is, because you can see the then and now, this is the result of millions of dollars of very, very excruciating surgeries, facial reconstruction, implants, injections,
Photoshop.
So this is sending the message to, let's say you're a young boy and you're feeling confusion. I could look like this. This could be me. No, unless you are this Kim is a pop star worth millions of dollars. So she can do everything to look like this. And even with all of that money, when you look at pictures of him without the without all done up, not nearly as attractive as in this picture. This is an extremely photoshopped picture. And then there's a series of other pictures. It's sending all the wrong messages to everyone. And again, society, the best kind of woman is a biological man. The prettiest woman is a biological man. This is so offensive. And I'm also sick of the fact that if you're a man, you can be sexual, you can be pretty, you can wear makeup, you can have nice hair. If you're a woman, you should be dowdy and serious, and you should have short hair, and you should dress like masculine and be, I am woman, hear me roar.
How about this? Let me ask the question this way, so Jessica feels safer about it. How do we handle, Scarlett, these cases in which if you have a transgender, let's say a woman, that maybe started in the first or second grade using the girls' bathroom, and those parents are insisting that that transgender girl continues to use a girl's bathroom, but yet you have bathroom, but yet you have parents of other girls that are objecting and screaming bloody murder about it. If you're the school district, I mean, I do understand how a school district is in a really bad situation here. On one end, they have federal law saying they have to allow that transgender girl to use the bathroom. And on the other hand, you have parents saying, I don't want my daughter going and showering with a biological boy. How are school districts supposed to deal with this?
I'm not sure federal law states that they have to. There is a 7th district court decision in which Kenosha was involved. That was a high school girl that had was transitioning into a boy, and there was like medicalization, and there was certain parameters. So that decision is sort of for Wisconsin. That's sort of like the overarching decision that a lot of like WASB, a lot of the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, a lot of the guidance is coming from. However, there's still local control in your school district, and I think that the decision is not definite. I do think a gender neutral bathroom is the perfect solution. And frankly, I think the majority of little girls that are uncomfortable and the majority of parents who are uncomfortable, I don't think that the vast majority of girls should be made to feel uncomfortable because of one or two or a very small amount of students. I question sincerely that an 8-year-old is making the decision of their own volition that they want to be, if they're a biological boy, that they want to be a girl. I question that. I question a whole lot about the situation. I think having had 5 kids and 5 8-year-olds, I just really struggle to believe that there are 8-year-olds that are going to their mom saying, Mom, I'm a girl and I need to use that bathroom without any sort of influence. I question, the therapy because I see the agenda, I see what's being put upon these kids. And I think this is where the term grooming comes in. I think kids that have different issues and tend to have sort of the same struggles, kind of they are predominantly in that category of gender dysphoric, and then they are susceptible to the messaging and I think the grooming that we are seeing in like for example, Blue's Clues. I had a tweet out yesterday that there's an episode of Blue's Clues, and Blue's Clues is targeted for toddlers and preschool kids. We're normalizing, there were cartoon characters with double mastectomy scars waving around a transgender flag while a drag queen was singing a song. So this is propaganda. This is early indoctrination. It's very frightening to me what's happening and how fast it's happening. And I don't know where we go from here. And I don't know where we're going to be in a year or two if we don't do something about it.
So it was last year that Biden's administration was trying to do that, though, correct? They were trying to force schools to allow transgender to use it. And it does look like, and I'm reading it now, that a federal judge did block that directive. So thank goodness.
Well, there was a change that Biden did to Title IX where he is, in my understanding, is there's a change relating to Title IX in sports as well, whereby school districts are not allowed to sort of have blanket policies banning, transgender people from, people born males being on female athletic teams and things. There's some loopholes in it. whereby if they demonstrate, that there's cause to do it, and there's some loopholes that would allow them to do it. But from my reading of it, the critics are saying it would put too much of the onus on the districts to have to prove why they can ban them. And so it would have a chilling effect and so forth. I wanted to make something clear, though, too. The reason I don't want to talk about McWanago is because I don't think it's vetted enough yet. And Jim and I pride ourselves on verification and investigative reporting. And I saw an email on it, but I haven't had time to really dig into it to verify, what's being said in a random email. And so we may talk about that down the road. I'm certainly not opposed to talking about the topic. I just think it needs a little more reporting and verification to really dig into exactly the scenario that's happening there. I'm not disputing it might be exactly like the email said, but we haven't gone through that process yet. And I guess it's just something that Wisconsin right now that we take really enormous pride in. It's kind of what sets us apart, as a news site. So that's why I just want to make that clear.
Fine. I was told, I didn't hear it, but I'm hearing that Belling talked about it today.
Yeah, Mark Belling did talk about it. That's when after Mark Belling talked about it,
and my own verification. Not
about it.
I don't rely on Mark Belling's verification. I do my own before I talk about things. That's
fine.
I'm going to say this now. As far as the question you asked, Jim, so the Whitaker decision in the Seventh Circuit, that is the decision that I'm on the WIL, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty website, and it does say that Seventh Circuit decision is binding in Wisconsin. And it does state that if a student, it's not just where a student has merely announced that they are a different gender. So that Whitaker decision does have some parameters where it has to be medically diagnosed, a documented condition, and since the diagnosis, the child is living according to their gender identity. I would say that's still pretty loosey-goosey, and so unfortunately, this is the decision under which the umbrella in which Wisconsin lies. There is the Adams decision that's in Florida. The Adams decision goes just the other way. The Adams decision states that separating the use of male and female bathrooms based on biological sex does not violate Title IX nor the Equal Protection Clause. So these decisions are obviously, states are coming up with different ways that they're looking at Title IX. And then the appellate courts are also finding different ways that they are interpreting Title IX. So this is going to end up before the Supreme Court. And and I'm guessing that once Biden issues these proposed Title IX changes, that states are going to file immediately. They're going to file to fast track this to the Supreme Court. So at the end of the day, it's going to be the Supreme Court that decides. And until then, though, I think parents have to fight really hard.
Okay. Terrific. Jessica, you got anything else on that, or we'll move on to our next topic?
No.
All right. Let's see here. All right. Next, we have the Durham Report. Jessica,
Durham Report.
Yeah, you want to start off with that?
I actually read the Durham Report, all 360 pages, although I'm kind of a speed reader. I scanned it because it's so long, But when you boil it down, I think it's just inescapable. It completely exonerates Donald Trump on the Russia stuff. And it was, I thought, extraordinarily, I want to say devastating too, but they don't get devastated. Devastating to not only the FBI, the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, their operation research team, but also the news media, which it turns out was winning Pulitzer Prizes for basically repeating made up, manufactured Clinton fomented operation research fabrications, right? Right, Jim? I mean, the New York Times won the Pulitzer Prize for fabricated nonsense from the Clinton campaign.
Yeah. By the way, let me quick interject on that. So this morning I was drinking coffee and I got more upset over that fact. And so I did email. I asked the Pulitzer for comment, told them that we're working on a story on this. And this is my quote. This is why I wrote them. In light of the revelation spelled out in the Durham Report, the fact that the Trump-Russia collusion story was completely fabricated, is the Pulitzer Board going to review the prize awarded the New York Times and Washington Post? If not, why not? Is the board concerned that not taking action will hurt the credibility of the Pulitzer brand? Deadline Friday. So, I haven't gotten a response yet. You don't think I will get a response, but I do think they need to be called out on it. I think they should do the right thing. And it was not just the New York Times, it was the Washington Post also that reported on it and won an award.
I think you're going to get a response, and it's going to say, we are reviewing your email and we'll get back to you, and then you won't get a response after that. Okay. Where does Donald Trump go to get his reputation back, and all of the energy and time that he had to spend, and money, honestly, dealing with this absolute nonsense about Russia? And there was so much wrong with this, and we knew this before the Durham Report. There was an Inspector General report, of course, but I really encourage everybody to read the Durham Report in full, because when you see it laid out in explicit, elaborate detail, it is really aggravating and really enraging what they did to Donald Trump. First of all, Durham points out that, the FBI opened this investigation on this incredibly thin piece of intelligence that came from this diplomat in Australia, where George Papadopoulos, this Trump aide, made some random comment at a bar or something. And he trashes the FBI for this. He says there just wasn't enough of a predicate to even justify opening such a sweeping investigation. That's number one. Number two, he says that they were receiving similar intel on the Clinton campaign, and they handled it completely differently. They didn't open sweeping, investigations into the Clinton campaign. They briefed Hillary Clinton and said, we got this piece of intel or whatever. So, in page after page after page, John Durham lays out like how the FBI handled the Trump campaign very differently from the Clinton campaign. Then he goes into great detail about how Fusion GPS, this shadowy research firm that was working for the Clinton campaign, doing opposition research, they're operatives doing research on Trump for Clinton, how they fed, this investigation basically into the FBI through contacts they had, and then fed it throughout the media, because this is a company that was founded by two former reporters in the Beltway. So they have a Rolodex of all these other liberal Beltway reporters, in the New York Times and the Washington Post and Slate magazine and stuff. And so they were feeding this Russian narrative to all of these media contacts, who were then sort of quasi-verifying it by the fact that they had some FBI source saying, yeah, the FBI is looking into it too, but it was all coming from Fusion GPS and the Clinton campaign. And they were manufacturing this narrative, and the media just ran with it like hook, line, and sinker. It's really shocking when you see it laid out. And to me, it's as egregious, honestly, as Watergate. And yet there's no accountability this time. There's no accountability.
And let's take it even more recent to the 2020 election, where now you have Hunter Biden. Do you remember that the FBI went to big tech, specifically Zuckerberg actually testified about this, or I believe he said in an interview, I'm not sure if he testified, that the FBI did approach Facebook, told them that this was just again, Russian bad information, and that they should ignore it. And Facebook actually began to go and block and ban any discussion of the Hunter laptop during the election cycle. So, you have here the FBI working against conservatives and Republicans and Donald Trump, both in 2016 and 2020.
That's a good point. And Ed Delgado mentions the Steele dossier, and that was also a big piece of the Durham Report, where he talks about, the dossier. We all know this, but, again, he lays out in very elaborate detail was just, it's just made up. I mean, there's no corroboration, minimally at least, there's no corroboration of anything that was in the Steele dossier. And it turns out that Christopher Steele's source was some Russian guy that was in New York City. Like, he wasn't even in Russia. And he, was allegedly, they were making all of this was made up. Or minimally couldn't be verified at all. None of it was ever corroborated. And yet the media ran this. Like, I remember BuzzFeed just threw this on the internet and it became this huge news story without a shred of corroboration. And then the FBI was using it to justify getting a FISA warrant to spy on an American citizen, Carter Page, who, far from being a Russian agent, actually had worked with American intelligence agencies, which I believe they left out of the FISA application. And then you had the FBI agents, of course, who were texting back and forth their hatred for Donald Trump. It's a really terrible thing that was done to President Trump.
So my take on this is, I know there's a lot of, there's plenty of CIA, FBI, all of that. I think but to me, the most concerning thing, and the reason why America is where it's at right now, the media. None of this, the CIA, the FBI, Hillary, Biden, they wouldn't have been able to get away with any of this had the media been doing their job. They are the most crucial component of this, because it's the reason why, when we were our previous conversation, why is there a biological man on the cover of the Sports Illustrated Women's? Why was Dylan the cover person for the cover girl for, Bud Light? Why are little boys going into little girls' bathrooms? All of this, these stories aren't getting amplified at all in the mainstream media. They are sympathetic to the woke. They are sympathetic to the radicals. They make someone like me look like a bigot, crazy, whatever. There is no truth. There's Wisconsin right now. There's used to be Fox News. Fox News is fading and losing a lot of credibility. There's you could say there's Newsmax, there's these sources, but there's nothing like the mainstream media. Because when my teenage kids, their Apple phone, that Apple News comes up first. The feed on Twitter, the feed on Facebook, everything. That news is bombarding everyone. And that news is overwhelmingly just state-run, sympathetic to one side. I hate Trump. Trump is bad. Orange man bad. And everything we do is good. It's destroying America. Destroying America.
I take real issue here with Kurt's comment here. I put it up that Durham is just another example of wasteful government spending. Durham failed to prosecute anyone successfully. But he exposed, I think arguably this was worse than Watergate. And this has exposed probably an all-time low in both American journalism and American politics. I mean, we've never been at a lower point. Yeah. And so the fact that it did take so much time and it did take a lot of money, I think this Durham report absolutely was necessary. It vindicated conservatives. And I think it's going to help, hopefully, and Jessica, maybe you can talk about this. Hopefully it'll help turn American journalism around.
But the problem is they're not doing a reckoning, right? I mean, they should be examining their own role in this, and they're not. Like CNN, I think, barely talked about this, if at all. And, because Durham did not have, a pile of successful prosecutions, people are using that to say, oh, there's a nothing burger. He wasted all this money and everything. I think people are really focusing on the wrong thing. And he made this really clear in the report. Like, sometimes, something can be really wrong, but to achieve a successful criminal prosecution where you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt things like intent, that can be a different story. So just because that you can't make a successful criminal prosecution doesn't mean that it's not a scandal or it's not outrageous behavior that, people should be held accountable for. And, the problem is, I don't see how this changes if the media, if they don't do a soul searching and a reckoning and honestly admit their role in it. And the stories that I read, they skimmed over the media part of it. And the Durham Report went into that in elaborate detail about, the role of the media in this and how they were just sort of being fed this misinformation, honestly, this false information, manufactured information, by these operatives who are working for Hillary Clinton. That's not journalism. It's just being fed fiction by operatives. And I guess that qualifies to win the Pulitzer Prize these days. I think it's appalling. So I think instead of focusing on what Durham didn't do, which is, launch all these criminal charges that were successfully prosecuted, I think people should be focusing on what he did uncover, what he did elaborately detail. I mean, we knew the broad strokes of it. We knew a lot of it already, but to see it laid out that way was really, I thought, compelling.
I wanted to respond, Ed, because Ed had said something. I'm just going to put his comment up. Just that it's not the media, it's the people at large. I disagree, because how are the people at large supposed to know what's going on if they don't have a free and fair media reporting? I think we're political nerds. Okay. We love this stuff. We live and breathe this stuff. Most people don't. A lot of people are also poor, and they have to work several jobs, and they have kids, and they don't have the time to investigate their own government, and sit and do all this work. I think that it is, I know that I get more upset when people who know, conservatives who've been in this for a while, when they sort of hide their head, when they know the truth and they know what's going on. But ordinary people, they haven't been told the truth, and we're expecting them to assume everyone is lying to them and to just get out there and investigate and do the hard work of a journalist as individuals. And that's expecting too much. So I'm not going to put the blame on, these people, they're just the unwashed masses.
And it's also the fact that the narrative is so omnipresent. So it's not that people are hearing, or we're hearing about Russia from one source on one day. They couldn't escape. We couldn't escape it. Everywhere we turned, it was this narrative about Trump and Russia, Trump and Alpha Bank, Trump and all these things that actually turned out to be manufactured by the Clinton campaign.
And it's even embedded into culture. It's embedded into the TV shows, to the comedy shows, to the movies. It's that other intangible way that it's embedded in the jokes. They made it
such a big thing. You're right. It's a good point. Like Jimmy Kimmel and people like that, and it embedded into popular culture. And you absolutely couldn't miss the narrative. And I do agree. Where is the accountability for that? And you are right, Scarlett. The media also could deliver the accountability right now. They could be knocking on Hillary Clinton's door and demanding answers from Hillary Clinton. And actually, I've seen nobody do that. I've seen nobody demand that Hillary respond to this. So I guess it's just sort of nothing to see here. We spent how many years listening to this drivel about Russia? And honestly, you could argue that it's happening again because we have another prosecutor in Manhattan right now who's going after Donald Trump, using very novel legal arguments and things like that. And there's questions about the statute of limitations. And, where is the proper media scrutiny as well of that activity?
So I have a question for you. If you were listening to Mark Belling yesterday, and he made a comment, and I was wondering what you thought, and what you thought, where he said, is the media overplaying their hand? And are they handing Trump 2024? They go too far, and they're resurrecting the Trump presidency. What they're doing is, do you guys agree with that?
He's a cat with 9 lives, and Jim and I were talking about this before, and we were trying to decide what do we want to do with the primary and everything, and we decided it's just too early. A month is a lifetime in politics, they say, right? And things can change so fast. And with Trump, just when you think he's down for the count, like he's like Rocky or something, back up he gets and swings again. And his enemies fatally misunderstand him all of the time, or under well, what's the word? They discount him all the time to their, detriment, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see what happens with this. I know that I'm looking Vicki McKenna's Twitter. She just was reposting Rasmussen reports, which shows that even among Democrats, the calls for impeachments and independence, and this is Rasmussen report, but that there's the call for impeachment of Biden is going up. It's going up between 4 points.
That would be a mistake, in my opinion. I thought it was a mistake.
I think it would be a mistake. But it just shows you the attitudes that he's losing sort of favor, popularity. I still am not convinced that Biden is going to be the Democratic candidate, but we'll see.
Well, I will tell you that the news is that Ron DeSantis is supposed to be announcing next week now.
Yeah.
So it appears he 100% is in, which Jim and I, when we were in Wausau and saw him, we had all indications that he is obviously running. He acted like a candidate up in Wausau, but he apparently is throwing his hat in the ring next week. I think the polls are really interesting, like how far Trump is ahead. I know that they're taken before DeSantis gets in.
I question some of those polls too. I question the polls. There's one poll that shows Trump ahead that shows Trump winning women at a much higher margin than DeSantis winning women, which to me, and also winning Hawaii. Like the polls are skewed. I don't trust polls at this point. I wouldn't.
They usually undercount Trump though. Like they usually.
I still think Trump has had an amazing week. I think coming off of that CNN debacle, and I think he owned it. And then now the results of this Durham report, I think that right now, and we're going to do a winners and losers, and I don't want to give it away, but Trump was right up there on my list as being one of the winners of the week, because I think he had a great week.
I look at that. I look at the amount of corruption in the FBI and CIA, and I actually think the opposite. I think which Republican would go in and clean house and not give a crap what anyone thinks. I think of Ron DeSantis. I think of a person who can, when I see what needs to be done, I feel that Ron DeSantis would be better at actually cleaning up those agencies and kind of attracting the kind of people you're going to need. You're going to need extremely capable, talented people. With he has a lot of ties with because he worked as a JAG officer with the SEALs. I don't know. I think that we have to think about that. Where I am extremely sympathetic to Trump that they've done this to him. However, I question if he would be the best person to clean up, because now he's got an axe to grind. He's got, I wonder if it would take someone who's outside of it, who would do the better job of cleaning it up and vindicating him ultimately vindicating Trump. I worry that it could be a vendetta, and that would not be beneficial for us or for Trump if he were to go back into office and then sort of become the person that, become the same type of entity that actually did that to him. I do worry about that.
I think that if I had to bet my house, I would bet that Trump is going to be the nominee. I think he's got this rock solid, proportion or percentage of the Republican base still on his side. They'll walk over coals for him. I think that shrunk a little bit, but I think it's, he's got this, he starts with this rock solid, portion of the Republican base. And I think it also depends on how many candidates there are, because we have to remember in 2016, he won the primary because there were a lot of candidates and they all divided the rest of the vote. And so I just think I agree with you. The polls, they're always wrong on Trump. They usually undercount him, but they're showing him so far ahead, like consistently. I think it's interesting. I think it's his to lose still. But I mean, I think Ron DeSantis is a great candidate. I think he's been an incredibly effective governor. And, and he certainly doesn't have some of Trump's negatives, including like the ability, I think, to get some of those women back that we've been talking about in the WOW counties. Jim, you had a point, though, I think.
I just thinking more about, first of all, I've got some issues here. I think both Trump and DeSantis are ahead of Biden in most of the polls that I've seen. Trump and they're very close. I want to say Trump is up by 1 or 2 points over DeSantis when you go ahead against Biden. But it's shocking that we're even talking about the fact that Joe Biden could be running again in 24. I mean, when you put him up against Trump or DeSantis, I mean, can you imagine that debate and how that debate would go down? I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but Joe Biden hardly knows where he even is anymore, what he's saying and what he's doing. What is Joe Biden thinking of even entertaining the idea of putting him up for president again? I think it's horrible. But they're in a jam, right? Because what are they going to do? They can't have Harris run because she's got even worse poll numbers. So the Democrats are in a real jam on this.
I'm not sure about
Newsom get in or something. You could see Newsom get in. Of course, there's Robert Kennedy.
That's what I thought. I've thought about Newsom coming in, but
could happen.
I don't think anyone's counting Trump out. I think everyone's assuming Trump, because there's the way. First of all, DeSantis has not really entered the race, and he's got $88 million to spend that he hasn't yet. So he hasn't run ads. He hasn't really been competing. So what I find interesting is that go on Twitter, that's a space I occupy. The attacks are on DeSantis on all flanks. He's from Trump, from the media. The trend is DeSatan right now. And all last week and early this week, you saw leftists say DeSantis is worse than Trump. We got to get rid of DeSantis. DeSantis is way worse. I don't know. I think I wouldn't even venture to predict. I also think that there's going to be a surprise. I think Glenn Youngkin is possibly going to announce. And I think it's going to throw a wrench. Glenn Youngkin has an exploratory committee, and he's putting out ads. That says to me that there's a sleeper entry that's going to divide things up a lot. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I still think I still think Ron DeSantis could eke this out, but we'll see.
All right.
Ed Delgado made a comment. If you could go back to it, Jim, like in the comment thread, it was funny.
Okay, hang on.
It's just one or two comments up. I was gonna read it because it's funny.
Okay. That one?
It's about yes. Gavin reminds me of a 90s B-Ray movie villain. I was gonna say that's because of his hair. Like he always slicks his hair. It's like too much hair gel out there in California. So I liked that comment.
Very good. Shall we move on to Sun Prairie Schools?
Yes.
Jessica, you want to lead that one off?
So I care a lot about the open records laws. I use them a lot. Jim uses them a lot. All the stories we do that have impact are often built on open records requests. I think the open records laws are some of the biggest safeguards we have against, tyranny or the excesses of government. And so I care about the open records laws. So when I see a governmental entity or a school district in this case, defying transparency and the public's right to know, it makes me very angry. So what's going on is the Sun Prairie issue, obviously with the locker room and the situation where you had the transgender student who was in the locker room with the girls. And so the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is trying to get the records on this. They want the emails between school officials and things like that. And they want to know what, is going on behind the scenes. They filed an open records request. And the Sun Prairie School District, they have a law firm that responded and said that they can get the records for $11,000, which I think is appalling. And according to Will's press release, they believe it's illegal, right? That they're charging all of these location costs. Like, they're basically charging hundreds and hundreds of dollars for school officials. You can see the list here, to go through their emails to come up with emails relating to this topic. They're saying it's going to take an hour and a half to go through their emails. Yeah. Like the top one, I can't even read that, but $130 an hour or something. It's absolutely outrageous. I don't think they know who they're messing with. I mean, Will isn't going to back down on this. They'll probably take them to court.
I think they know that. I think they know Will isn't going to back down. I think they know it's going to lead to more litigation. I think they're buying time and hoping the public stops caring about this. Because when they release this information, it is not going to be good for the Sun Prairie School District. And so I think if they stall, they let this get more litigious. They're ultimately, because this has happened to Will before, and Will was victorious. And Will is not going to pay these fees because they know it sets a dangerous precedent for people like me who file open records requests, for people like you guys.
Like us. Yeah, right.
The next time, if they cave into this, the next time I file, next time you file, they're going to put this heavy burden upon us and try to deter us from transparency. So I think this is all a game where they're hoping we stop caring, we stop noticing, and by the time
they want to drive up the cost
out, then no one will care.
And they want to drive up the cost. They want to drive up the pressure point. They want to make them pay for doing this. The
process is the punishment.
Right.
They're it's lawfare. That's what they're doing. That's what the left is good at, lawfare. I also now, oh my gosh, Jessica, I just had the same thing happen to you. I had a good point.
Sorry. So, I know. You hate that when that happens.
I had a really good point.
While you think about your point, what I noticed today is yesterday I had filed an open records request to Sun Prairie Schools because I wanted to find out. I wanted to get the contract between Axley Lawyers. That's the law firm that issued the cease and desist letter to a parent a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to know how much taxpayers were paying for those legal services to serve that parent with a letter. If you recall, that letter was a cease and desist letter telling the parent that they could no longer email or communicate with the principal in any way. And so I wanted to find out what those fees were. And I actually had a Sun Prairie parent contact me today wanting to know those numbers. He wanted to address the school board with that. But what my point is, and I also wanted to get the agreement, the agreement that the law firm has with the school. For the first time today now, Sun Prairie responded back, giving me an email response, notifying me of charges, how much it may cost, and this and that. And I'm like, I just need a couple sheets emailed to me that I'm sure are PDFs on your screen on a computer.
Yeah.
So now we're seeing that they're going to start charging us. And we as Wisconsin right now, we would never be able to pay $11,000 for an open records request. So I hope Will does take them to court on this. But yeah, when you read the story here, it talks about that there's claiming that they're going to have all 118 employees search all of their computers, all their documents, and that search will cost in excess of $5,000, and that would be on top of the other $5,000 or $5,700 outlined up here that they wanted. So
I mean, it's outrageous. It's outrageous.
And so the point that I was going to say is I have testified on behalf of transparency laws in Madison, and I've sat before the committees, and the Democrats laugh at us when we say we would like more transparency. They say, you have all the transparency. We have statutes in place that provide transparency. And the school district that you're in, I'm going on to the board docs. Oh, look they have board docs. It's transparent. You can go in and you can ask anytime. And we all in return laughed at them. Like, you have no idea. It is like pulling teeth to do an open records request. They make you refile and refile and refile. Then they don't answer the question. They make you re-ask the question. And eventually most parents give up and they throw up their hands. Or they charge these exuberant charges, or they actually take the parent to court and say, stop harassing us. They send cease and desist to us. Like, this is our special, we are the kings and queens of this realm. Peasant, be gone with you. They treat us like peasants. This has been happening to me for 3 years. They're the feudal lords and I'm just a mere peasant, begging for scraps. Hell no, that's not the way it goes. That's not the way it goes. And when we demand transparency, and when I say that Wisconsin needs a parental bill of rights, now you know why.
Well, and the Attorney General, I would remind people, is supposed to be the top enforcer of open government in the state of Wisconsin. And, there was this situation a number of years ago. This was before Josh Call was AG. And my students filed open records requests with school districts. I think it was for travel expenses. And I remember one of the school districts was trying to charge them $1,500 or something like that for the records. And we called the Attorney General's Open Government Office and they intervened for the students. They called the district. They said, you can't do this. You can't charge that much. It's ridiculous. Reduce it. And they reduced it. I remember the students got the records for $100 or something like that. It was a great award-winning story. But now we have an Attorney General who not only doesn't care about open government, but he himself violates the open records laws, in my opinion. I have an open records request with the Attorney General that has been pending since May of last year, by the way. May of last year. Okay. And Jim and I filed a complaint with the Attorney General because we thought that John Chisholm did an illegal denial of records to us of people that he was refusing to prosecute. We wanted to see the names of people he was refusing to prosecute. And the Attorney General had sat on that complaint for over a year and a half without bothering to respond to it. That's outrageous. Like, if we had Attorney General Eric Toney, Will could turn to the Attorney General's office and they could intervene. They could say, hey, Sun Prairie, you can't charge $11,000 for a bunch of emails. It's outrageous. I will tell you, though, that every single investigative project I've ever done that was a good project has involved some element of an open records battle. And so when public entities act like Sun Prairie is acting, I always have believed as a journalist, that's a red flag to me that they're hiding something. There's something they don't want the public to know. And so I triple down when that happens. And I know Rick Essenberg and Luke Weber and Dan Lennington over at Will, and they're the same personalities, and they're going to quadruple down and they will get these records. Yep. And if they have to go to court to reduce this cost, they will. But Scarlett, you made a great point. We're all not a law firm. And the problem is an average parent who would try to get records like this would also get hit with an $11,000 bill, and they just would probably go away. They wouldn't know what to do.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. That's the whole purpose. They're trying to deter us from asking questions. They Sun Prairie made a website, which they were just reiterating everything that we already knew. And the website was a joke because they're like, here's our website with our gender policy, which is basically a non-policy. It's confusing, and it states how much they didn't like that this happened. They didn't want this to happen, but then they double down on the same language, which is exactly why it happened. And they don't answer any questions, yet claim that they've now cleared the air. And now, so look at how transparent we are. They talk in circles. It's gibberish. and they think that they congratulate themselves on how wonderful they are, and then they, pat themselves on the back, look what we've done, and it's nothing, and everyone is still confused. And of course then they say, oh, Wisconsin right now, you didn't get the story right. Oh, Will, you didn't get the story right.
They won't say how. Like, they won't say what Will got wrong in its press release. Like, they won't. They just, it wasn't all accurate. Well, okay, Sun Prairie specifically, what are you saying wasn't accurate? And they won't say. So
that's release the documents. And then if you want these documents, just pay us $11,000 and
pay us $11,000. Okay.
Those are redacted documents too that don't.
So
it's outrageous. It's just appalling.
Before we move on to our next topic, Jessica, we did not discuss this. I didn't discuss this with either of you, but it just kind of came to me while we were doing this podcast. Do you want to discuss or give a little talk? Should we talk about the Milwaukee Press Clubs and the award night?
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
I think we should. I think we have some interesting comments on that. I forgot. I couldn't believe I didn't even think about that tonight for the topic, but it did happen this week. So
yes,
I mean, briefly
about it.
Yeah, we're not big braggers or anything, but I think there's some interesting stories about it.
Well, you should brag. This is a big deal.
Yeah. So
Jim looked like, let's do it this way, at the press club, Jim looked like a cat that swallowed a canary the entire night, or like a kid on Christmas morning. I don't know if I've ever seen you so excited.
But I think what's so great about it is, there are a lot of categories, but there were a few, the major categories were announced right at the beginning of the event. And I never even expected that we would be announced on it. But we did get the first goal, by the way, first place. And it was for writing best coverage of a single news topic or event, including breaking news. And we got that gold award, first place, beating out all other media in the state of Wisconsin for all of 22 for our Doug Blasevich story. Again, he's the guy who brutally stabbed to death his wife 40 times, left the kids in the bedroom, and subsequently was arrested, convicted, and then Evers' administration, his parole commissioner John Tate, the same one that LeMahieu, by the way, failed to fire, and we blew that up, and Jessica used her journalism expertise to ignite the media, got the family in front of the governor. And I mean, eventually we got John Tate to resign ultimately.
Can I ask a little question that's in the comments? Because I want, who chooses the winner? Because I think that makes the award even more important.
That's a great question. Go ahead, Jessica.
They don't reveal that, but they are journalism, either professors or journalists from other states. So it's never somebody from Wisconsin. So I've judged contests, like I judged the Idaho Press Club, and I've judged New Orleans Press Association and things like that. So they're journalists and journalism educators, but from different states. What I think is cool about that is the Wisconsin media obviously is bent over backwards to try to discredit our reporting, because it's been damaging to Democrats, and they only seem to pick up our reporting if it's damaging to a Republican. But if it hurts a Democrat, they twist into pretzels, do everything they can to try to discredit unfairly, quite honestly, our reporting, because they've never actually managed to discredit it in a legitimate way. So now you have these judges from out of state who are journalism. They're all journalism, professionals who are reading this without that biased lens, because they're not invested in Tony Evers being reelected or whatever. They don't care. They're from a different state, and they're saying this is the best investigative reporting, or best news reporting, or best public service reporting in the case of the other awards, in the entire state. And I found that, I think, the most gratifying part about it, because it happened in a room full of reporters who bent over backwards trying to discredit the very same reporting. And now they had to sit there and applaud as like Jim went up to get his plaque. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome.
It was. And I have to tell you then, and so we were I was Pickleton. The night could have ended for me. It was a terrific night. But then we found out a little bit later, we won 2 more awards. They were back to back. And I don't know who remembers Milwaukee media. If anyone remembers Kathy Michaelby, she used to be an anchor for Channel 12 back in the 80s and 90s. And I remember growing up, watching her every night. She was on Channel 12. Well, she was the one presenting the awards. Sadly, she just lost her husband. She talked a little bit about that. She lost her husband, I think, to cancer. But I always had a lot of respect for Kathy. I always thought she was a fair journalist. And I remember her work as Tuesday's Child and everything else. But it was cool because then she announced our award that we got for, I'm holding them here, online best public service story or series. And that was, and really this one goes to Jessica. Jessica did all the work on this one. Victims' families not notified about the paroles. She was the one that reached out to all the families of all the victims of the parole people that were being released. The victims' families of the parolees that were, that who had killed the family member. She reached out to them, and I think every time was the first one to tell them, oh, by the way, your family's killer has been released. I know that was tough on her. She did a great job documenting that, writing that story. So we got a first place gold award for that. Congratulations, Jessica, on that one. But what was great is as we were going up to get that award, Kathy Michaelby starts reading the next award, and it was for online best investigative story or series. And that was for our work on the Tim Michaels residency questions. And it was funny because Kathy said, wow, Jessica McBride, Jim Piorchik, again, another award. And then when we got to the table, the lady commented like, wow, you guys are going to need like a cart to take all these home.
You could have heard a pin drop in the room.
Oh, that was the thing. Oh, that was the other thing I forgot to mention. So everyone's clapping, right? When they announce the awards, everyone, the whole room claps. And as soon as we got announced our third award, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. I mean, it went dead quiet. And Jessica and I are just beaming ear to ear. We got up there, we're walking up there basically. I don't want to.
You're such jerks.
We were kind of jerks about it. Yeah.
No, it was great. I mean, all of those stories took enormous effort. I'm really proud of the impact of the parole stories. We kept a wife killer. We helped keep. I mean, it was a ferocious family that did the heavy lifting on that, of course. But like, we helped keep a wife killer behind bars, and that was so helpful to that incredibly courageous family. And to be able to help prevent them from going through more pain, which would have been enormous if he had gotten out, was very gratifying. And there's now a parole transparency bill winding its way through the legislature to change some of the, openness problems with the system. And that's a really good thing. And I thought it was disgraceful how the media refused to cover the issue of the lack of notification of the victims' families about paroles and parole hearings. I thought that was a systemic failure of state government to follow the law. And it was case after case after case. These were not anomalies. They were the pattern. And the media refused to cover the human side of the parole issue. They censored the voices of the victims' families. It enrages me to this day. And they covered the parole issue as like a numbers story, or they would write all these thumb-sucking stories about this is how the parole process works in Wisconsin, and just so that they could say they covered it. But they censored the voices of the victims, and it's disgraceful. And so I'm really proud we won for that one. I really am.
It was difficult for me. I wrote some emails to Charles Benson and then Borowski, 2 of the Journal Sentinel, because they were trying to twist and turn and incorrectly report on our stories. They were really doing everything they could do to twist that story away from making Evers look as bad as he did. And I confronted them on it on email. And I got to tell you, I saw both of those guys at that award banquet, and I did everything in my power. I was staring at them. I wanted to get in their face and shove these awards in their face and be like, you jerks. You guys tried to discredit us. You wouldn't even respond to my emails when I called you out on it. And here you go. But I didn't. I knew that would be unprofessional, so I didn't. But I wanted
So
to.
Jim, if 10 years ago and you were a cop, like someone had come in a time machine and they would say, hey, Jim, in 10 years, you're going to be an award-winning journalist.
Not even that. If you would have said to me 10 years from now, you're going to be sitting in the Milwaukee Press Club Awards, eating dinner with all these other media outlets, I would have thought you were absolutely insane. So no. And then, much less to win these awards. I mean, what a terrific night for us.
Yeah, I was proud of you, Jim. You did great.
Proud of you too. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm done bragging.
All right.
All right, should we move on to winners and losers?
Yeah, winners and this is a new segment we're pioneering. I like how I think he's a traitor now. I can't stand him. But back in the day when I used to go on Charlie Sykes' TV show, he always had at the end of the show, like, I don't remember what it was. Was it the outrage of the week or something? But he would have something where you would go around the room and you would all say what you thought. And we kind of borrowed this from that because I sort of like how that concluded.
Yeah. So who wants to go first? I can go first, I guess. So
we're doing winners and losers of the year, right?
Yeah.
Of the week.
Winners and losers of the week. Which one did you want to do first? Winners or losers? Let's do losers first.
Oh, okay. Do losers.
All right, we'll do losers first. I think I'm going to stick with, I think this week's losers is the American media and journalists throughout the country who have been exposed for no longer doing any kind of true journalism in this country. And I hope it's something that turns around. So I think they are this week's losers.
Me next. Media was one that was at top of my list, but I'm going to say biological women. Biological women are the biggest losers this week because proposed Title IX changes they're going to stab us right in the back, as well as our girls. We are going to sacrifice our girls on the altar of woke. I think it's a shame. I hope that feminists wake up, they continue to wake up, and they continue to realize that they need to stand with us, the biological women, and reject this gender ideology because they are erasing women and they are making us second-class citizens. They are taking away everything that's beautiful and good about being a woman, motherhood, femininity, love, beauty, concern, caring, and the fact that we can get pregnant, one of the key things, and that we have XY chromosomes, they're trying to take even our periods away, claiming that men can have periods too. So I think we need to reclaim what it means to be a woman and share that with our daughters, stress how important it is, and make sure that women don't continue to be the biggest losers.
I don't want to ask. I'm sorry. I don't want to know, but they're claiming that men can have periods.
Yes, men can have periods. Why
would they want them?
Yes, there's TikToks where there's trans identifying. I guess it's always confusing. Biological men who say that they are women, where they are using tampons. I'm not sure exactly where they're putting said tampons, but they are injecting them. And
all right, that's okay. That's all I need to know. All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna read. All right, I have two losers of the week. Whoops. So for one, I'm gonna read a tweet. The person wrote, in an abhorrent display of disrespect for every law enforcement officer in Wisconsin, Representative Andraka, Democrat, right, from our area, used today's discussion of a resolution to recognize May 2023 as Law Enforcement Appreciation Month to promote her unconstitutional gun control agenda. So Representative Andraka is my loser of the week. She couldn't just say, you know what, it's Law Enforcement Appreciation Month. We're going to appreciate law enforcement. Like that was too hard for her, apparently. My second loser of the week is unfortunately Republican Devin LeMahieu, the leader of the state Senate, who I think right now is mucking up the very carefully calibrated negotiation tactics of Robin Vos. And I don't understand what he's doing right now. And he needs to take a lesson in politics 101.
All right. Very good. Winners of the week. I torn on this one. I think I'm going to turn up. I think it's going to be the Wisconsin Republicans in the Assembly. I think led by Robin Vos. I think that the work they're doing is great. If we can get this bill passed, they're working with both Evers. They're working with LeMahieu, and it's not a perfect plan, but I think that they are the winners of the week for pushing through this bill.
Did you see, Jen, did you see Stephanie's comment?
What a joke too. It's like, yeah. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I shouldn't even have brought it up.
There are tampons in boys.
Jen doesn't want to talk about tampons.
Yeah. So my big winners of the week are Republican governors. I think Republican governors are kicking ass. Literally, they are doing an excellent job. There's a lot to look at and kind of shake your head. But Republican governors are signing bills that are banning gender affirming surgery. They are supporting school choice. They are doing, and even Ron DeSantis is sending more troops to Texas. Governor Abbott is trying to secure the border. Other governors are trying, Republican governors are trying to help Governor Abbott do the job that Biden refuses to do. And recently, DeSantis was the latest to sign a bill banning gender affirming care in the state of Florida. So I think Republican governors are doing a great job. They are standing strong, and it's because they have people behind them that are pushing them, that are demanding conservative policies, that are demanding America First policies, and that's the way you do it. When you elect a Republican and they have power, you need to be behind them and encouraging them to lead and to govern like conservatives. That's what Democrats do. When they get power, they don't capitulate, they don't cave, they don't, I'm not so sure. Public opinion says, no, they do what they were elected to do. As Republicans, we need to do what we're elected to do. And in Wisconsin, we have a supermajority in the Senate. We have a majority in the Assembly. We need to do everything that we can do to govern like a conservative. And those of us listening, we have to be the force behind them.
Very good. Outstanding. We are going to be cutting this under 2 hours, which would be great. Do you guys have anything else to add?
You didn't get to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, we were going clockwise. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to pick Riley Gaines for my winner of the week. Yeah. She came out very strong again, this time on the Adidas ads. I think she's been extremely courageous. She's become the face and the voice of, female athletes in all of these controversies. I think it's courageous because we live in a current cancel culture climate, especially around a topic like that. And so she is my winner of the week.
She's great. I love her.
She is great. Very
good.
Bring
her to Wisconsin to testify on a bill protecting women's sports.
That'd be great. That'd be
interesting. Very great.
All right. Okay. Very good. Anyone have anything else?
No.
We're going to finish in 2 hours.
Very good.
Yeah, we made it. Yay.
All right. All right. Good night, all. Thank you for joining
us. Good night, everybody.
All right.